Well, we are so excited to be joined by Errik Hood from NYU Steinhardt. Errik has a BM from Wright State University, an MM from Northwestern, and a DMA from Ohio State University. He has many credits into operas and concert appearances, including internationally and at places like Carnegie Hall, and is an assistant professor of vocal performance and the director of the program in vocal performance at NYU Steinhardt, which is located, unsurprisingly, in New York, New York. They take about 30 in the total vocal performance cohort for freshmen. We'll talk about that a little. And they offer a BM in vocal performance and a BM in vocal performance concentration musical theater, which we'll talk about some of those specifics for our musical theater and vocal performance curious folks. Errik, welcome on the pod. How are you feeling today?
I'm feeling great. Thank you for the lovely introduction, and I'm so thrilled to get to talk to you today.
We are too, and I'll let people a little behind the curtain. Errik is like the last of a cohort of colleges that I've been so excited and been trying to schedule for so long. He's been patient with us. We've been patient. We've been scheduling. So sometimes when you say, "Have you guys ever thought about having NYU Steinhardt?" I'm like, "Yes, we have. I promise. We have. We've thought about it. We've been trying. They have busy lives. Errik has a busy life."
You're being so gracious. Yeah, we've it's been a busy year, a busy semester in the spring, and we've gone back and forth trying to find the perfect time, and I'm so glad it's finally worked out.
This is the
Thank you so
perfect time.
much.
We found it. Okay, let's start off with the hardest question, which for some schools is a bit of a softball. Often I kind of toss out like, tell me about the ethos of what makes a Carnegie Mellon student, or tell me about the ethos of whatever. I want to do that to you in kind of multiple parts.
Okay.
I'd love to hear about like what your feelings of the ethos of an NYU student is kind of in general. But then I think I want to find different ways to answer. I think probably ask this question a couple different ways. So many of our students are going to try to answer that question of, should I be applying to Steinhardt or Tisch if I know I'm interested in musical theater and I know I'm interested in NYU, which I think those two separate things often interest people. They like NYU and they like musical theater. They maybe like vocal performance. We'll talk about that. So I'd love to kind of hear from as many perspectives as you can, sort of your feelings of what an NYU student is, and then what's maybe specific to Steinhardt about why a student might apply there as opposed to Tisch.
Absolutely. So I think starting with NYU, I think one of the things to keep in mind is that it's going to be a slightly atypical college experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're not in a small college town where the college campus is kind of your world for 4 years. You're in the middle of a thriving metropolis where the city is your campus. You know, we don't have a quad; we have Washington Square Park.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're not moving from the biology building to the math building. You're in skyscrapers in downtown New York City, and so if that kind of bustle and excitement as
Mm-hmm.
part of your college experience and as a part of really forming your campus, if that's something that excites you and interests you and having access to everything that New York City has to offer, NYU is a great place for you. For Steinhardt specifically, I think we really pride ourselves on an NYU student is first and foremost a part of a community.
Mm-hmm.
With Steinhardt, and we're going to talk about this more, I know, later, in the vocal performance program specifically, we have various different concentrations and degree programs. And rather than silo off students into a particular, okay, you're a musical theater person, so you do only this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Instead, we actively encourage cross-training, mingling of these different concentrations so that we're learning from one another. And so being a part of a community and finding your individual voice through those variety
Mm-hmm.
of experiences that are available to you in NYU that maybe might not be available other places or available in different ways in other places. That's one of the things we really pride ourselves on, is helping each student find their voice, both figuratively and actually literally, being a vocal performance program first rather than, you know, a BFA program.
Yeah. I love this. Such a great answer. And we are going to try to burrow in on each of these different things separately. Before we get into some of the kind of artistic and curricular differences, because I want to talk about, and again, we had someone from NYU, Tisch, come on and do a deep dive on that. So I'm not going to ask you to do all that with Tisch, but, you know, some of the curricular differences between Tisch, but also between maybe a standard BFA in terms of what you'd be offering as a BM. I'd love to also just talk about the academics of NYU before we get into that. So what does it look like in terms of just the percentage of my credit hours, and say it however you want. I think credit sometimes is a little confusing. So if you want to talk about the schedule throughout the day, but basically how much academics, how much non-singing, dancing, acting, if I'm an MT, or how much non-singing am I getting if I'm in vocal performance, am I doing in a given day?
Right. It's kind of hard to answer because it depends on which semester you're in and how you want to structure your electives. You know, if you're doing a minor that's related to the performing arts, you know, if you're doing a dance minor, which many of our students do,
Yeah.
if you're a classical student and you're minoring in one of the languages in which you might be singing,
Yep.
if you're doing a minor in like business, entertainment, marketing, then a larger percentage of your coursework is going to be dedicated toward the performing arts. But
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that I think is really incredible about NYU is that it's an incredibly academically rigorous program. We have incredibly smart students.
Mm-hmm.
So they're getting the benefit of an academically rigorous university environment with conservatory level training when they're in their
Yep.
acting, dance, and music classes. So it's a standard curriculum as far as a liberal arts school instead of a conservatory model.
Uh-huh.
But and those classes are taught by at NYU we have world renowned faculty,
Yep.
and then the musical training, the acting training, dance training is we work very hard to keep it at conservatory level. So you're getting kind of the best of both worlds there, if that
Yep.
makes any sense.
It totally makes sense. And do you have a sense, and you don't have to give me exact percentages, but you mentioned some of those minors and majors that are related to the performing arts. Do you have a sense of how many people, double major in chemistry or computer science? Or are there people who I'm doing the vocal performance MT track, and I'm also doing something political science, something completely unrelated?
Double majoring is possible at NYU. I'll be perfectly candid. The way that music and performing arts classes are structured, you're not going to 2-3 hour lectures, twice a week.
Mm-hmm.
You're in class multiple times a day, and then you're also in rehearsals in the evenings and performance in the weekends. And so double majoring is a little tricky. And I would say that aiming to do 2 degrees in 4 years would be a pretty big stretch. You're probably looking at a longer than a 4-year plan if you're trying to do a double major. But I would say the majority of our students take on a minor, and our curriculum, every curriculum we have in undergraduate, no matter what concentration you're in, is designed to allow enough elective credits for minors to be taken. So, and there are tons of related minors that are offered both within Steinhardt and outside of Steinhardt.
Well, let's get into that curriculum. And so we'll juggle as much as we can juggle at once, because I kind of want to talk about the 4 years of growth in terms of sort of what you see as the cohort of year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4 in terms of the program. But then also if you can try to help me with the tracks of like, if I'm a BM in vocal performance only, and tell me if I'm saying this right, but it's sort of listed as BM in vocal performance or VM in vocal performance : MT if you're an MT potential person.
You're pretty close, closer than a lot of people get. It's a little confusing. The degree that we offer at NYU Steinhardt is a Bachelor of Music and Vocal Performance, but that degree, every student who's enrolled in that program has a concentration. So it could be a concentration in Western classical music, it could be a concentration in contemporary music, or it can be a concentration in musical theater. So they're all technically the same degree. It's just what the concentration is, and then that the further you get into your degree, year 2, year 3, year 4, the more specific your coursework gets towards your concentration. But early on, all those students are taking classes together to get the fundamentals of their musicianship and their musicality and the basic skills of analyzing their repertoire from a musical perspective, but also from an interpretive and dramatic perspective.
Yep. Well, talk me through those tracks. So what is that? What is the vocal performance? This is what they all take. And then especially, we do want to hear both. I really want to hear, or I should say all three: contemporary, classical. But then also, I know a lot of our students who are going to, on that edge, go, I'm really interested in the voice, but I do predominantly think of myself as doing musical theater. What would be that differentiating track if I'm a musical theater person?
Well, so let me work backwards a little bit. I think that when we talk about a Bachelor of Music versus like a BFA or something, it just means that the foundational coursework is in musicianship. And so you're talking about music theory, you're talking about aural skills, you're talking about some keyboard skills, some history of the development of the music that is involved in music theater and other styles. And we think that's incredibly important for emerging professionals in all the fields, but especially musical theater. As well as I do, a lot of times our first gig out of college is workshopping a new show, right? And if we don't have the skills other than listening to a recording to learn the music, or being taught by rote by a coach or a repetiteur at who knows what per hour, instead we've developed those musical skills in our college career, in our academic training. We're going to be way more well equipped to do those early gigs that are workshops or new works or things for which a cast recording does not yet exist. And so that's really foundational. The other thing that I think is important about the musical theater program specifically being a part of a vocal performance program that involves classical and contemporary it's funny. A dear friend and colleague, Warren Freeman, and I just presented on this very topic at Music Theater Education Association International Conference in London. And we're talking about how musical theater is this omnivorous genre
Mm-hmm.
that just devours other styles of music, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not gaining the skills about how to sing these various styles in a healthy way, a sustainable way, a stylistically appropriate way, but also a socially responsible way, if you're not learning those skills, then a lot
Mm-hmm.
of musical theater is going to be inaccessible to you without an additional training in singing.
Mm-hmm.
So the way that we kind of approach the vocal training and why we put it at the forefront of our degree program isn't just because it's a music degree first and foremost, but because we feel that to be an effective professional in the musical theater industry, you have to be able to sing in all of these styles that this musical theater genre devours and makes part of the repertoire. And so that's one of the things we really stress there.
Yep. It's so interesting. I think we've talked before on the program of, both the letters of the degrees sometimes mattering more or less depending on the school. And then, of course, some of the ways in which, whether it's a degree in drama, a degree in, all these different things that things are labeled. But it just seemed like maybe it is relevant. Some musical theater programs say, well, we're a BM in musical theater, but it's the same as a BFA. It just happens that we're in the School of Music. It seems like, at least from my perception of it, that the BM in vocal performance is more music heavy than your average BFA. So this is a case where you were reading that BM, you would be saying, I'm going to get more music training than I would if I got a BFA in acting or BFA in drama, where the focus was musical theater. Is that fair to say?
Without knowing the details of all the curricula that are out there, I would say that's a pretty safe assumption. Yeah, and something that we really build our program around. I will say one thing that we pride ourselves on, it's not just for our musical theater folks, but for our classical folks and our contemporary folks as well. Usually if you get a degree in vocal performance, it's like all music all the time, right? And we built into our curriculum, not just for the musical theater folks, acting, movement, and dance, right? So I really don't want people who see, it's a degree in performance, not a BFA in theater, to think, that means I'm being shortchanged in acting training or movement or dance. Those are key components of our required curriculum as well.
Yep. Well, and maybe with the helpful distinction of it's maybe more music heavy than your average BFA, but it seems like more acting and dance heavy than your average BM in vocal performance or whatever.
That's exactly the middle line we're striving for, is to put out the most well-equipped, multifaceted young professionals possible.
And, it's part of the reason we do the other half of these podcast episodes. We, of course, interview colleges, but then we also talk to people about what their paths were. We see many people very successful in musical theater who only studied vocal performance. Their focus was voice, and that was their way in. And then maybe they had to take acting class after. You can put all the different paths together in different ways. But same thing with dance. Of course, you're an amazing dancer. You can find your way that way. Do you have a sense of like what that percentage is? Again, credits or hours or whatever. But in terms of how many classes am I getting in? From a freshman, sophomore, junior, senior perspective, how many classes am I getting in something that's music related, versus how much acting, how much dance for the musical theater managers, and also for the vocal performance you mentioned?
That's a great question. It's a little difficult to answer because we do offer there's a small component of our curriculum that is straight acting, but more a really large component every semester you're enrolled virtually in our program. You're doing some sort of like song analysis is kind of the way we label it, and it's studying acting through the interpretive and dramatic analysis of the song repertoire, right? So we're using acting terminology, we're learning these key components of straight acting, but we're applying them from the very beginning on how we approach the songs that we're singing. So that training is in there, but it's more integrated in vocal performance classes where you're getting up and singing, being coached, talking about how you analyze music from a dramatic perspective and an interpretive perspective. So you're getting that acting kind of ingrained with the voice classes and the repertoire studies. So we work really hard to marry those things in order, from a really pragmatic perspective to make sure that we can get as much training as we can for the credits that we're allowed to require a student to take, but also because we think that if you learn to act, but when you start singing a song, that all goes away, or vice versa, that's not really effective, right?
Yep.
So we're getting that acting training kind of integrated into the vocal performance. And when I say that, I mean the actual performance of vocal repertoire in classroom settings.
Yep.
They're getting that acting training as a part of those courses. So it's kind of hard to make a percentage because the Venn diagram overlaps
Each
so
individual
much.
class is some acting. Some singing.
Yes.
Yeah. When you mentioned this idea of cross-training, I think you meant specifically with disciplines, but I just want to make sure also it's clear for our families in terms of, it's NYU Tisch is its own beast and it's a little confusing with all the different studios. How does it work in terms of if I were someone who goes, I want this VP degree, but I would love to take a class over there at one of these other studios? How does it work in terms of crossing studios, being able to take different things across NYU versus how much is housed within NYU Steinhardt?
So we do a lot of work to make sure that virtually everything a student might want or need is housed within Steinhardt. Collaboration with Tisch is certainly possible. We have students who do it. We have students who do productions with Tisch, both their official productions and also their student-led productions that take place. We've had students take part in both of those. As far as coursework over there, that is something that can be arranged, but it's a little more difficult when you're talking about crossing those lines between two different colleges within the university. So it's possible, but we work really hard to make sure that anything a student could want or need in regards to the industry and performing specifically, that they have access to housed within our college.
And from a kind of basic expectation, the way that they might think, hey, I'm spending 2 years at this studio in Tisch, and then I'm switching to another studio. There's not a basic expectation of I'd be popping in and popping out. I'm spending a year at Steinhardt, a year at Tisch. You're going to one school or the other in general.
Yes. In fact, you have to go to I would advise folks to go to the NYU website because they actually have a fantastic article and FAQ on should I go to Steinhardt or Tisch, and it actually asks a lot of the questions that students and parents come to us with, and the admissions folks and academic advisors folks from both colleges weigh in and do a lot of work to kind of provide some answers to parents and students who are trying to distinguish between the two.
Well, let me ask one of the big FAQs, if most FAs Q, whatever, attorneys general. Let me ask one of the ones that we get the most of from our families, which is, can I apply to both? Do I have to choose between the two?
My understanding, and I would encourage folks to contact admissions to make sure that I'm correct, but my understanding is that that the students will be asked to apply to one or the other.
Yep. That is my understanding as well, but I wanted to be from the horse's mouth, from the Erik's mouth.
Right.
I love it. Let's talk a little bit. So we talked mostly about, sort of those different curricular paths. I'd love to talk kind of in a couple different contexts about the students' launch into the business, both from the perspective of like how they're prepared to meet industry folks, which we always kind of talk about, do we do showcase? Do we have a virtual component to that? How are we, classes that prepare us for all those kind of things? But maybe especially I'd love to hear about what those different paths, and of course, I'm sure your 3 tracks don't all line up in the exact 3 tracks that they spend in their lives, but what the path looks like in the launch for a musical theater oriented person who wants to do musical theater versus even like, what is the launch of somebody who says, I want to do vocal performance, maybe independent of musical theater, someone whose focus isn't as much on musical theater as they launch. So how are you preparing your students at 22 to be hitting the industry, whatever that industry is?
Sure. Let me speak briefly about the other 2 concentrations, just to kind of satisfy some curiosity, and then I'll talk a little more at length about what we do for musical theater folks. So we actually just revamped our contemporary curriculum. We're really excited about it. It's a relatively new program for us anyway, but we have taken the feedback of the first few cohorts of students and really made some impactful changes. There's no longer like an academic voice recital like you would expect from a traditional Bachelor of Music voice performance degree in the contemporary concentration. Instead, they do a set with a live band as part of their capstone, and then they record an EP as a part of their capstone. And they also take a class in concert promotion. And so they actually have to promote a concert. And so those 3 things, being able to record either in the studio or at in your at-home studio. We teach classes that equip students to do both, to promote their own shows, promote concerts, and then the experience of working with a live band, writing charts, giving directions. That's all a part of the capstone experience for the contemporary program. For our classical students, they're getting opera workshop, and there's 3 semesters of opera workshop. The final, which is really about auditioning. It's about preparing, interpreting your audition arias that you bring into the room when you audition for, in the classical world, the next step from academia is usually something called a young artist program. It's basically an internship with an opera program, right? And so they're learning about what those are, how to prepare their resume, their websites, their materials for that. And then they do sample auditions for some industry folks, and they get feedback about what that looks like. For our musical theater folks, they're getting that song analysis training, that repertoire training, along with their voice lessons and coachings, acting classes, dance classes. All of that culminates in a year-long sequence of business and audition skills. And the first semester is about kind of going through offering repertoire that you're working on in your coursework, and getting, we have a stage director, we have a music director, and we have a producer, like an artistic and general director of a theater company, that are all involved in this course. And so they're getting feedback from all 3 of those folks about, well, what repertoire really suits you? What do you bring to the table? What do you bring into the room? Are you finding music that really showcases what you do best, right? Instead of inadvertently shining a light on your areas of improvement, right? So they take a whole semester of that to get them ready. And then their second semester of their final year, they're applying that. They're doing a business skills class with our current faculty member is Jen Bender, who is at, maybe I shouldn't mention other theaters, but who has a lot of experience with the industry and business side of it, and she's helping them prepare their websites, prepare their materials, prepare their resumes, making sure that their package, outside of what they physically bring into the room, is polished and refined and really tells a complete story. And then they're working for a whole semester on refining what they bring to a showcase. And then all of our musical theater vocal performance students perform in a showcase in an off-Broadway venue, in person, for an invited audience of industry professionals, agents, casting directors, and other folks who are connected to the industry. They're also getting feedback. We bring in industry guests over the course of that semester while they're preparing for that showcase, to get feedback. Hey, I love what you're doing here, but in a showcase situation, you might want to try it slightly differently, or you only get a minute and 15 seconds for your solo. So maybe it's a different part of the song that you want to bring to that showcase to make sure it's really showing you at your absolute best. So they're getting that advice over the course of an entire semester. It's curricular. It's not something that's done outside of their coursework. And then they have the opportunity, as I said, to present that with a live band. Right now we do it at New World Stages, off Broadway in Midtown.
So cool. It's so well explained. And I think really interesting for some of our, vocal performance curious students to hear, like, even what those next steps would be if it's not musical theater and but how rigid are those 3? Like, if I were someone who's like, well, I definitely want to do musical theater, I love that, but I'm not mad about putting down an EP. I'm not mad about that. Like, how much flexibility do I have within those tracks if I were interested in doing a little bit of something, a little bit A, a little bit of B?
Oh, it's like you're writing my own question. Like, I get to write my own questions. It's fantastic. One of the things NYU Steinhardt prides ourselves on is it's not that you're allowed to cross train and cross genre; it's that you're encouraged to. Yeah. It's a strong part of our program. So we have those electives that many students opt to utilize to do a minor. But those electives can also be utilized to take courses in songwriting if you're a musical theater student, or in additional dance if you're a classical student and you want to get more in touch with your body, or you feel like, my operatic path is going to take me down a path where, I'm doing some newer works, or I'm doing waltz or Baroque dance or something like that, or where our classical students can get more acting and movement to make them feel more complete in their performance, so it's not just the old operatic cliche of park and bark, right? Yep. So the electives allow for students to take courses in these other concentrations, and they're open to those folks. Additionally, not only do we allow, but we encourage students to audition for our productions outside of their concentration. So every semester we have classical voice folks singing in our musicals. We have musical theater folks filling in, and especially if we're doing like an operetta with some dance and movement, we got a lot of musical theater folks who audition and are cast in those. And then we have a lot of contemporary productions. One of the primary ones we do, for an example, is called Cover Me. And what we do is we take a familiar song and then we reimagine it in a different style. And the students get the experience of kind of adapting their vocalism for that style, and then working with the live band to perform with the live band and the style that they're looking for. And so all of those cross training skills are a part of why we think a degree in vocal performance with the concentration, it allows for a more multifaceted artist than just like a degree in musical theater, a degree in classical singing, right?
Yep. It makes so much sense. I mean, we talk about it all the time with all the different aspects of the industry, which of course can be, I'm making an EP. It can be I'm singing musical theater. It could be I'm doing a concert, but of course also could be like voiceovers and animation, all the different things people do.
Absolutely.
And that there's just really not the distinction that you think. It's not like you're one or the other. It's like you're whatever you can do at a professional level that someone's going to pay you to do. If you can do voiceover work, that's something you can do. If you can't, you can't.
Yeah, I'll use a couple more examples. If you're taking an elective and you do like a home studio recording class, if you think that a high quality self tape isn't going to be an important part of your career as a musical theater performer, you're mistaken, right? Yeah. If you don't have the ability to sing with, now I'm not saying that Western classical singing needs to be the root of all singing. In fact, I think I am kind of anti that thought. I think that excludes a lot of lived experiences and really valid musical genres. But, there's a lot of musical theater out there. If you don't have a handle on a Western classical vocal technique and you audition for Sondheim, you're going to have trouble. And so it's not just that we allow that, but we think it actually makes the musical theater students way more prepared when they cross those bridges while they're here.
Totally makes sense. Let's talk about cost a little bit. So NYU is not known as a very cheap school. You may be aware of this. It's not a cheap ticket. What are we talking about in terms of like scholarships? So again, I think we've read it. We're loosely around $60,000. It seems like with tuition, and then there's going to be room and board, and all this different things. So it's going to be expensive. It's going to be a lot of money when you put it all together. How does it work in terms of kind of need-based scholarships, academic scholarships, artistic scholarships, or just how scholarships work in general with Steinhardt?
Yeah, that is, when we talk to parents, we talk to students, that is one of the hesitations that a lot of people bring into the room and bring into those conversations. But there's a couple of initiatives I'd like to speak about. And again, I want to say that I'm a faculty member. I'm not a member of the financial aid team. So I would encourage anyone who wants to learn more about this to go to the websites or reach out to the financial aid office to get more detail and to make sure that the information they have is correct. But two initiatives that I want to speak of. The first one I think is really, really, really exciting. And that is, it's a brand new initiative. And that is, if your family income is under $100,000 a year, there is zero tuition. So NYU will not charge a cent of tuition to students if they start at NYU as a first-year undergraduate student and their household income is under $100,000, which I think is incredible because that was the position I was in when I was entering college. And if I had known a school like NYU is accessible to me financially, knowing what my socioeconomic status was, it would have been a life changer. So that's thing number one. And initiative number two, which I think is equally important, is NYU is committed to meeting 100% of demonstrated financial need. And what that means is when you fill out your FAFSA as a graduating high school student, it pumps out, one of the numbers that FAFSA pumps out is your anticipated family income, right? Or family contribution, rather, right? So that they use all kinds of math and things that go above my head as a singer to figure out what your family could reasonably contribute to your education. Now, minus that family contribution, through a combination of scholarships, grants, and offered work study, NYU is committed to meeting that demonstrated financial need without loans. That being said, loans are almost always an option, either through FAFSA or private loans, if that anticipated family contribution isn't possible for whatever family circumstances there might be, or if a little extra help is needed, or if a student is more willing to take on a little debt to make a little more wiggle room financially,
Yep.
that option's available to them. But NYU is committed to, you subtract that anticipated family contribution and they will meet the rest of the need through grants, scholarships, and work study.
That's awesome. And I think basically to say what you're saying in another way, or at least what I'm hearing, that predominantly most of the scholarship money that you're going to be receiving is going to be closer to need-based than large academic scholarships or large artistic scholarships, right? That if I'm lucky enough to be a family that has lots of resources, which of course some of our listeners and students do, that it's unlikely that you're going to be getting large academic financial, full ride scholarships as well. Or to tell me if that's not true.
I would I'd hesitate to comment on that too much because it's a process that takes place fairly far removed from my involvement. But my understanding is that there are academic scholarships that are available that might even eat into that anticipated family contribution, so that's a little less, right? So I don't think it's like, oh, it's all need based. I think
Sure.
Now the acceptance rate to NYU is pretty low based on the academic rigor of the school. So it's really competitive when you're talking about academic scholarships because it's all high achieving students, right?
That's what I was going to say. I think a lot of our students will sometimes find that their same grades that might get them into NYU might get them very large scholarships at other places academically, where they may be more middle of the road at NYU academically, which we'll get into that on the admission process in the second half a little bit more. You did say the word FAFSA though, so we have to like buzz you or shock you, or something has to happen as a punishment for saying the word FAFSA, which, as we found out a couple weeks ago or whatever, now it's going to be delayed again this year after last year was delayed. I mean, let's hope that people listening to this podcast 2 years from now say, "What are you talking about? FAFSA works great." Let's hope.
That is our hope as well too, and it's a word I don't love falling out of my mouth either, with some of the troubles that have been happening lately, but. All we can do as faculty members and members of our program is do our best to trust in the process and know that NYU has the best interests of its students and potential students at heart, and that's what they're prioritizing.
I love that. All right, so I'm going to ask my last question in this segment, which I'm just going to rephrase a different version of the same first question that I'm asking so often. If students that you're interacting with, who are asking these questions, and maybe this is not really so specific about NYU Tisch in this case, but really just a student. Let's imagine someone who really is looking hard at NYU Steinhardt, who is someone who's maybe applying to some BFA musical theater programs, maybe some vocal performance programs. You, of course, as an example, like, how do you find, I'd love to kind of hear, like, when a student who has multiple options, a picture and a sample student of ours who we've had many students who do some BFAs, some BMs, and some vocal performance BMs. Let's say they have 4 or 5 great options, a competitive musical theater school over here, a great vocal performance school over here, and they have you. Why would a student choose? Do you find they feel like sign on the dotted line and say Steinhardt is right for me? And then why do you feel like if a student decides, you know what, I am going to go to this BFA and MT, or I'm going to go to this other vocal performance that's less musical theater focused? Why have you been hearing that students make the choice that they make when they do?
I think. Well, let's start with why people want to come, because that's the thing I like to talk about more.
Sure. That means you have to end on why they don't want to come, though.
Well, and then maybe we'll sandwich it. I think one of the things is, now I know this is a little skewed because we've got representatives from both Tisch and Steinhardt, but NYU has consistently been ranked as one of the top, if not the top, represented school on Broadway. And its proximity to the industry, it's the ability to go take in what's happening professionally in the industry, see what's at the forefront of the industry, be based here in New York City where the industry is based. That's a huge draw. Not only the proximity of the student to those things, but also the proximity of those folks to our campus. We bring in stage directors, music directors, performers, and then we're not flying them across the country. They're not giving up part of their performance schedule to do it. They can do it on an afternoon and take a subway, right? So they're interacting with folks from the industry in a way that I think is really difficult at other schools not based in New York City.
For sure.
The other thing, and I know I've touched on this a bit, but the omnivorous nature of musical theater and the various kinds of vocalisms, stylistic considerations, and healthy, sustainable singing. If you can't do it 8 shows a week, you can't do it.
Mm-hmm.
And when you have a program that's based in music and voice first, and the responsible and stylistically appropriate performance of that repertoire in a way that's also vocally sustainable,
Mm-hmm.
when that's at the forefront of what you're doing, uh, where there's we minimize, I think, and significantly, this maybe I make it, maybe I get this great break, but I'm singing in a way that's not as healthy and sustainable
Yep.
because that wasn't as central to my training as it might have been elsewhere.
Yep.
And I think those things, and when people come to campus and they see the way that these different genres, folks from these different genres interact and support one another, and
Mm-hmm.
how it's not and how we don't silo these folks, and
Mm-hmm.
how it's really a community where you might discover things about your artistry and about yourself that you wouldn't discover if you were in such a uh, uh, like if you're in a more homogenous
Mm-hmm.
population, right? A less multifaceted, multi-genre population. Um, the reasons that people decide to go elsewhere often is, one, they want a more typical college experience. They,
Mm-hmm.
they want to walk across the quad, and they
Mm-hmm.
want to go to a football game, or they want to, they want that typical college experience. And
Mm-hmm.
also the price tag is shocking,
Mm-hmm.
but I here's where I'll sandwich it. Those are the two main reasons, right? Or because they get a big scholarship somewhere else and they don't get that,
Sure.
especially when it's talent based. You get
Uh-huh.
this letter saying, "We think you're so talented. Here's
really good.
X amount of dollars," right?
Sure.
And
Does
then they
Eric
look
not
at
think I'm
that.
talented? Why not? Why didn't I get the
Yeah,
letter from that?
exactly.
Yeah.
But that's
Yeah.
just not the way the funding model works at NYU.
Yep.
The funding model works that everyone
Mm-hmm.
who everyone shows what their demonstrated expected contribution from the family is, and the rest NYU will take care of.
And you're saying the acceptance is them saying we're really talented. We obviously
Exactly.
thought that would give you the acceptance.
Exactly. We get hundreds and hundreds of applications, and we matriculate, as you said, 30, only around a third of which are in musical theater. So if you're getting in, it's the equivalent of getting a giant check, because your financial need will be met by NYU.
Yeah. And one thing notably absent from this was, it seems like you're not experiencing a lot of students who are coming in, looking at the curriculum hard and saying, I just wish there was more dance. I just wish there was more acting. Or, I mean, it maybe, of course, some of these people are self-selecting out, knowing they're already interested in a vocal performance, kind of degree. But is that not something that you then encounter once they've sort of seen the holistic approach? They go, oh, this is actually what I want. Or you're not finding a lot of people go, I just need to dance more, or I just need more non-singing acting training.
Not really. I think that is often a concern that students have when they come into the room, but especially if they visit campus, or they take a long, hard look at the curriculum, or they realize that something that's interesting about our program is it's not we are under the Steinhardt College, right? But our department isn't a music department.
Right.
It is a music and performing arts professions department.
Mm-hmm.
And so that includes dance education, that includes theater education, drama therapy, music therapy.
Mm-hmm.
So and we actually have I don't want to misquote it, but something along the lines of 6 or 7 different dance courses available just in our vocal performance program alone.
Yeah.
Right. But outside of that, dance education has dance classes. Music business has classes about orienting to the industry, and to
Mm-hmm.
how breaking into different aspects of the business component of this field works. Not only within the vocal performance program, but within music and performing arts professions at a larger umbrella, so many of these things that people might assume aren't available to them because it's a music degree are easily accessible.
Yep, really. There it is. You got the other piece of bread. The sandwich is beautifully put back together. I love it.
Thank you.
We'll take a short little break, and on the back end, we'll jump into the audition and admission process for NYU Steinhardt. So back in a flash. All right, we are back with Errik Hood from NYU Steinhardt, and we're going to talk a little bit about how to get into NYU Steinhardt. So I want to talk a little bit just basically about the application and the pre-screen, the audition process, and especially for people who are more in the musical theater world, how that might differ from what they're expecting of. I'm doing some songs and some monologues and some other things. I'd love to hear, just from an artistic perspective, what are you putting together in terms of an audition for you, as that might be different than other musical theater programs?
I think it's surprisingly similar to what you might be putting together for a BFA program or something that feels more of an acting or based program. What you're doing is you're applying to the university, obviously. And as we mentioned in the first block, the university requirements and admission requirements are pretty stringent. It's an academically rigorous school, and it's a tricky school to get into, period. But that being said, as far as our program goes, what happens is there's a pre-screen that takes place, and so that's just submitting a video, an introductory video where we get to know you a little bit, and then 2 to 3 songs covering a couple of different time periods through musical theater history, right? So we get to hear you sing some Golden Age, we get to hear you sing maybe some post Golden Age, we get to hear you sing some contemporary pop influenced music, right? And by pop, I mean contemporary music generally. It could be folk influence. Maybe we're talking about Bright Star, maybe we're talking about a jukebox musical. But so we're hearing you in a few different genres and styles vocally. Yep. We take those pre-screens and then we invite a significant number of those folks to come and audition and do a second round on campus.
Yep.
And at that, we may or may not ask for a monologue based on how we see the acting taking place during the singing.
Yep.
I would love to say this for the record because I get this question all the time, and having a platform to answer it. There are times where, based on the strength of the pre-screen, we're like, that's a student we want at NYU. Uh-huh. And they might not be invited to come to do a second round. That doesn't mean they're not an active consideration. In fact, oftentimes it means we only have so many slots and there's just zero question that we want this student at NYU. So anyone listening, if you do your pre-screen and you don't hear back about a live audition, please don't write us off as an option. Please know that you're still being actively considered. And don't assume you haven't gotten in until you receive that communication from the admissions office.
I'm glad I would have not thought to ask that. But I do want to ask about, at the live audition, what else might they expect to have prepared? Because, in a musical theater audition, I think they would be expected to have at least 2 songs, often different eras, might be asked for a pop song, that kind of. So that's already within the normal world of a BFA. At a vocal performance audition, some of our students might be expected to have an art song, might be expected to have more stuff in their book. Is that an expectation at Steinhardt, that if I'm looking at an MT major or focus within the vocal performance, would I still want to have more sort of a song in a different language, that kind of thing?
No, if you're concentrating musical theater, that's the repertoire we want to hear. Right. Now, we will, as a part of the curriculum while they're here, they will sing pop, they will sing Western classical music, but we're not gonna expect someone whose interest and desired career path are in musical theater. We're not going to ask them to sing an Italian art song because we really don't learn a whole lot about them.
Yep.
We want to hear them sing in maybe a Golden Age style or a more I like to use the word classically informed because I hate the way the word legit implies that other styles are not legitimate. But
legitimate,
yeah. So, but something where we hear access to the lighter vocal mechanism, right? Because it's essential in the training. But that we can hear that through a variety of repertoire. It doesn't need to be Western classical based. So that's not something they should expect to have to do.
I love it. And you already said the idea of if they submit a pre-screen, they could potentially get admitted without the callback. But what percentage of students are getting a callback? You don't have to give me exact numbers here, but do you have a sense of, like, if I were to submit, about how many of those students are going to get a callback to have a live audition?
I think that might be under one of the umbrellas that NYU would prefer I not discuss. But
secret umbrellas.
Yeah, no, I don't mean to say that it's a secret, but there's so many factors at play that I would hate to misquote something. But great. It's a sizable number.
It's like I play 25 to 45 years old. I won't give you an exact age. That's about what I play.
Exactly.
I'm giving you a range here.
Exactly. No, okay, look at me. I've been playing dads since I was 25. So it is.
I would believe 25. You still could be 25. I believe.
You're so kind. So, but I will say it's a significant percentage. We make as many time slots available
Uh-huh.
as our facilities and our faculty allow. And
Yep.
then we fill every single one of those slots so that we can see as many folks in person as possible.
And I was just going to ask, what does that audition landscape look like in terms of, are all of these people coming to New York City? Are they doing some of these online? How are the different ways I'm able to do a quote unquote live audition for you?
That's a great question, and it's one that's evolving. To be
Yep.
perfectly honest with you, during the height of COVID, all of our callbacks, our live second round of auditions, were
Yep.
done virtually, right?
Yep.
And there are some pros to that, but some there are definitely some drawbacks to that as far as what we're able to hear,
Hmm.
how much a student's access to high quality equipment
Yep.
affects equity.
Yep.
And so there's definitely some drawbacks that we're analyzing. We're continuing to explore. For example, if you are applying from, we get applicants from all over the world.
Yep.
Cape Town, Sydney, Tokyo, um, you know, every continent. We're getting applicants from all over the world, and so there are ongoing discussions about, is a flight from
Hmm.
Cape Town, South Africa to New York for a 5-minute audition slot, is that a reasonable ask?
Yep.
And we're evaluating that. It's not just that 5-minute audition slot though, because we truly believe seeing the campus,
Yep.
experiencing what the city's like, especially if you've never been to New York, touring our facilities. We just opened a brand new facility with new classrooms, performance venues, state of the art theater with pit and state of the art fly system and lighting system that we share with Tish. And so seeing those facilities, touring the
Hmm.
campus, getting a feel for what campus life would be like, that's a huge part of it, of the decision making process. And
Yep.
the live audition really kind of provides that opportunity.
Yep.
But we are there's on it's a point of discussion that we're still having and evolving. And uh, my viewpoint on it personally, now maybe a little disclaimer: I'm not representing the viewpoints of NYU at this point, right? But
You're
uh,
distinctly representing the viewpoints of NYU. Just
right,
your
yes,
personal viewpoints was leading. Yeah.
I am a spokesperson for the president
Ooh,
of NYU, right? No,
this is
no,
what's
no.
happening.
These are my personal opinions. I think that I think there are also some equity issues involved with, some folks are going to be able to book a ticket to New York
Yeah.
City and find housing in New York
Absolutely.
City, and then some folks aren't.
Yep.
And so I think those are all factors that need to be weighed, and we are still in the process of figuring out how much of these virtual audition possibilities that we were forced to develop in the height
Yep.
of the COVID pandemic, how many of those are helpful to keep around, and how many of those do we let kind of fade and return back to something a little more pre-COVID in
You
its
and the rest
approach.
of the world and industry. I remember when Molly was on the podcast, Molly Haran was talking about Tish, and she said, "Oh, we're going to keep online forever." And I was like, we'll see. We'll see. Like it's,
Yeah,
because she was saying all the good points. I was like, those are really good points, but there are all these other points of what is live in this experience and the experience of visiting campus. So yeah, I
yeah.
think a lot of schools trying to figure that out. So,
And
um,
Tish, and one thing about Tish versus us, uh, we are also hearing potential classical singers in
uh-huh,
which you know amplification is not a part of the art form really,
uh-huh,
and in almost all circumstances. And so hearing that voice in an acoustic setting, in a live setting,
yeah.
is a lot more essential maybe than it would be for a singer who is going to be singing in a largely amplified genre. So
Yeah.
it's a little harder for us, and then then saying, okay, well, if you're classical you have to come in person, but if you're musical
Oof.
theater, that's
Yeah. Yeah.
it gets very tricky very quickly. And so we're trying really hard to navigate in a way that's equitable to students.
Yep. And one I think what so many schools are dealing with is what do I need from my perspective to see? And then, of course, what is a good student experience for them to ultimately decide to choose the school? I mean, it is a lot harder for a student to choose NYU after only having a virtual experience than it is if they've been to campus, as you mentioned. Um,
Yes.
I love talking in terms of as we get admitted, so for Tish, and we've certainly quoted this number as a loose number in general. They've said it's just about 50-50. I mean, they're not holding to a mathematical 50-50, but that you really need the academic is half of it and the half of it is artistic. Is that true in terms of a similar balance for Steinhardt?
um the way that the admissions process works in our program is that our evaluation of the audition is a large component of the the how do I say? I don't, there's a process and a variety of things that are weighed by the admissions office when they decide
Mm-hmm.
to admit a student. They make that decision, and our evaluation of the audition is a huge part of it.
Is a huge part, but is that mean maybe more than 50%? Is it less than 50? Do you have a sense of kind of what, I mean, of course, it doesn't have to be identical for every student, but does it feel like it's around that balance? Or, because some BFA schools, it's 90%, it's 95%, it's all the artistic, right? Obviously, that's not the case here with NYU, but do you have a sense of how that weighs?
No, to be honest with you, I don't think I have. I don't think I could authoritatively give a percentage. I will say that there is a threshold when we hear an auditioning student where we say, this is a student that we think could thrive and succeed in our program based on
Mm-hmm.
what they brought to their audition. And then there's a below that threshold we say these are not students, and those students aren't considered for admission into our program,
Right. You're
right?
saying an artistic threshold on your end.
Exactly right,
Mhm.
exactly right. And not just artistic, but uh, maybe they're coming in with vocal habits or
Mhm.
difficulties that we want to make sure that we can responsibly say that we can help get them to a professionally viable place in 4 years. And
Mhm.
if that's not the case, then it's really doing them a disservice by accepting them into the
Yeah.
program.
And
So
do
we mark
you
students. Oh, sorry, go ahead,
no, you go,
please.
you.
I was just going to say that we indicate whether or not a student is above that threshold, and then we rank our highest through our lowest within that
Mhm.
window, and then admissions takes that information and then factors it into their formula, and then that's how our incoming classes are
Totally makes
chosen.
sense. And do you interact with the academic application at all? So are you reading essays? Are you seeing any of that? Or is that all dealt with by the Office of Admissions?
That's done largely through admissions. They do often include a personal statement or include those things, and we have access to some of those. But we actually, and we'll see like we can see like their GPA from high
Hmm.
school and stuff like that. But what we really want to do is we really want to make sure that we are listening and watching what they're bringing as performers,
Hmm.
and trusting the folks who evaluate students from an academic perspective to make those determinations. So we don't want to kind of get outside of our lane. We really just want to kind of identify whether or not this is a viable student for the rigors of our program,
Yep.
and then within that spectrum, how do they compare with the other students who are auditioning for us, and then let the admissions office evaluate those other components as that's their area of expertise.
Totally makes sense. And I'd love to get into kind of what are you sniffing for in that audition, or maybe sniffing's the wrong word. I should say listening for, if a lot of it's about the voice. But I really want to hear both in terms of like vocal talent, but then also other factors in terms of what is holistic. Of this seems like the student would thrive, or it feels like in terms of what I'm seeing as an artist. And we talk about acting and other things that are happening while you're singing. What is that process for you in terms of what you're doing behind the table and evaluating that might give a higher score or a lower score?
That's such a great question. Yeah. So I think one thing I'll say immediately, because this is another question I get all the time, is um, students think that they need to bring in the hardest song that they can sing.
Hmm.
But what they don't realize is that usually shines a light on what they are not yet able
Mhm.
to do completely, right?
Mhm.
We'd much rather hear something that's simpler, sung as well as possibly can be sung, and also sung in a way that allows for storytelling.
Mhm.
So we're listening for students who we feel vocally are at a place where they're going to be able to sustain the rigors of our program, where you're singing and acting all day, every day. Where musically you're in a place where you're going to be able to send to the academic rigors of our music curriculum, and we're also looking for abilities of students to connect and to storytell and to bring authenticity into their performances. And I'd say those are our biggest criteria, and I think we can hear that whether there are some students who come in and it's clear that they've never had a formal voice lesson in their
Mhm.
life, but there's something in their voice that we hear that we know can be cultivated into something truly special. um, and their innate ability to connect to an audience and to storytell from an authentic perspective, that's evident whether or not they've had 6 months of voice lessons, 10 years of voice lessons, or they've never had a voice lesson in their life. They just love musical theater, or they love singing, and they want to investigate it as a career. So the same thing is true, by the way, of pre-screens. It's great if you're able to have access to a recording studio or you have high quality equipment, but we can usually, unless there's something technically wrong, like something goes wrong in the recording process, we can hear something in the voice, we can see something in the storytelling and the communication that allows us to say, yes, that's the one we want to see in person, or not. So I just really want to make it clear that students shouldn't be scared off by the fact that, oh, it's a voice performance degree, but I haven't had a decade of voice lessons, so I'm probably not eligible. Or
You're not listening for these are the 30 best voices I'm hearing at their current where they are right at this moment.
Exactly not, because what we expect over 4 years is growth. That's what we're investing our time and energy into, and for these students is to help them grow and to find their best singing. Right, we're looking for what are the raw ingredients for that, both as a storyteller, a communicator, and a singer.
And it sounds like from how you've described the process, some schools will look at as they're putting together a cohort of 20 or whatever it is, they're going to be laying headshots out on a thing and going, if this person, not this person, not this person. It sounds like that's not a process that you guys are able to do as much, given if you're sort of ranking them more numerically and then getting back from the office admissions the final answer. It sounds like you're not necessarily able to control exactly which 30 or which 10, 10, 10, or however it breaks down. Is that accurate to say?
Yeah, yes. I would say that's accurate. And I think even if we did, I don't think that's something that really fits into our ethos.
You're not looking for 4 sopranos and 4 tenors and exactly this balance of, yeah.
It would be nice if it worked out that way,
Right.
Just for casting perspectives and things like that, to make sure that we're able to utilize everyone as much as we'd like. But no, that's not the case. What we're looking for is who are the X amount of students who we feel are most equipped to thrive in this training environment. And then we know that through our ensembles, which we haven't had a chance to talk about, but even though we were a music school, I loved choir in college. I had a lot of fun in choir, but we've got a handful of choirs, but we've also got pop rock ensemble, studio backing ensemble, unplugged ensemble. We've got a lot of ensembles that aren't your standard, like stand on risers and sing, even though there's nothing wrong with those. Those are really fulfilling artistic endeavors as well. But those are opportunities to perform. Our main stage productions are opportunities to perform. Each concentration has a student club that puts on productions. So we have faith in the ability for students to find performance opportunities when they get here. Plus, they're in New York City. Students are constantly producing their own cabarets at 54 Below or wherever. And so it's we know that the performance opportunities will be there for them. It's more about who are the students who we feel are most likely to thrive in this environment, and we can bring to a level of professional viability after their 4 years with us.
Well said. Okay, let's take one more short break. And if I can keep you a little bit longer, we'll do a little bonus questions on some vocal tech nerdery.
Ooh,
Back
I'm
in a
ready.
flash. All right, we're back with Errik Hood from NYU Steinhardt, and we got to get into some vocal pedagogy because we're mentioning in the pre-show just how many Steinhardt teachers, MTCA at least I know, has hired over the past number of years, and how well thought of the pedagogy program is. And we mentioned we have a PhD, but you're getting a DMA, is what I think you said.
We've had a PhD for several years, and we are bringing in our first incoming cohort of DMA students this fall. We're really excited.
I'd love to hear just from your experience as a vocal pedagogue, some people say. I don't know what the right way to say that is. What do you think makes a great teacher? And maybe especially how that's kind of different from, I think, especially in the musical theater world, I think people do look at voice teachers different than an acting teacher in terms of like the way they study pedagogy. There's one feels a little more scientific potentially versus a little more holistic. But how do you sort of view the study of voice and the teaching of voice? And it seems like there's all these different methods that are very specific. And how do you sort of view that from your years of doing it?
Oh man, I'm not sure how many voice teachers will listen to your podcast, but it's like a whole can of worms you're asking me to open here.
I'm ready. I'm aware.
So
I'm trying to get some controversy. That stirs up
that's
some
let's
some
yeah,
downloads. You know,
let's get it. Let's
some voice conference is angry right now.
exactly. I think what makes a good voice teacher is it's multifaceted. I think first and foremost, in order to create art, people have to feel safe. In order to learn, there's tons and tons of research that suggests that learning is struggle
Mm-hmm.
and that we don't retain information if we're not in a place of safety.
Hmm.
So the first quality is nothing is going to be taught if you're not creating a safe environment for all folks who walk through your studio door. That's thing number one. Thing number two is our ears, because our instruments are located inside of our bodies. It's not like if there's something wrong with my Steinway because when I hit C5 it makes a clicking noise, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I know exactly which key it is, and I can open it up and look and see what's wrong with it, and then I call a piano repair person and they come in and the next day it works perfectly again. That's not the way our instruments work, obviously. So we voice teachers have to be able to hear what the student is doing, what the singer is doing, and based on their matrix of knowledge, from scientific study, from anecdotal knowledge, from their own singing, what is the likely cause of that inefficiency, or what could be done to optimize that singing, and then so identifying what the likely causes are of inefficiencies, or the what's getting between the singer and their goal,
Mm-hmm.
right? The goal sound that they want to make. And once you've determined, okay, this is what I surmise to be happening based on my knowledge of the science and the anatomy and the physiology, but also my anecdotal experience as a voice teacher and singer, then I have to know what approach to bring to that student based on whatever I've identified the issue to be, but also where that student is, what they're prepared to do, what they have the ability to do, what I expect to work based on the style and genre that they're using.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that I firmly believe, and this is where there might be a little disagreement, is I firmly believe we have to know why that will help. It's not enough to know that, like, oh, I've gone to a bunch of master classes and I've watched a bunch of voice students, or I've tried this, and for some reason when you do it standing on your head it works, and so I just have all my students stand on their head and they always sound better. If I don't understand why what I'm doing with my student is positively impacting their singing, I'm really running the risk of doing some damage or creating an over-reliance on me as a teacher, right? My number one goal as a voice teacher, and I firmly believe this as well, is to make myself obsolete as quickly as possible. And it's the teachers who create lifelong dependency on them that I think is a giant red flag. And so I have a feeling that's one of the reasons why, and it's such a great compliment to hear you say that you enjoy working with the voice teachers we've trained at NYU Steinhardt. We have an advanced pedagogy certificate, so it's a post-grad degree specifically for voice teaching. And it's because, and I think that's a big reason why, is that our teachers are never just trying something that they heard, that they read in a book, or that they saw someone do in a master class, or that their voice teacher did for them. It's, I know why this particular exercise or adjustment will positively impact what the student is doing. So
do you feel like that's true for the student as well? I mean, I think certainly that would be true. To get hired at MTCA, you would have to know why. That's something we drill in the sort of interview process of, like, do you understand all the physiology and all the reasons why? And do you have some science-based understanding of it? I think I hear a lot of different opinions on, does every singer need to have that level of knowledge? Like, if I'm a singer but not a vocal pedagogue myself, that's not an interest. Do I need to have that level of granular knowledge of my own instrument and how it operates, do you think?
Oh, you're going to get me into so much trouble.
This is what I want to do. I want to get you in trouble. This is going to be the pull quote that's going to go on the BuzzFeed article. I need to know.
I would say oftentimes it's actually counterproductive, right? So one of the things that I study as a part of my comprehensive training as a voice teacher is motor learning theory. And that's how
Mm-hmm.
our brains acquire complex motor skills, ranging from how to swing a golf club to how to do a complicated dance maneuver
Mm-hmm.
to how to sing. It is
Mm-hmm.
a complex motor skill, right? And what we're trying to do with complex motor skills is automate them
Mm-hmm.
so that when we try to accomplish a task, the first thing that happens when we try to accomplish the task is the optimal outcome,
Mm-hmm.
right? And most often, uh, trying to exert executive control over an automated task is one of the quickest ways to make it inefficient and unproductive,
Uh-huh.
right? You can do it this way. I do it in master classes all the time. I'll have someone just walk across the stage and I say, bravo, great job. You
Mm-hmm.
crushed that. Now, could you walk across the stage and just describe everything you're doing as you do it?
Mm-hmm.
And just, it's like they've forgotten how to walk
Uh-huh.
because they're suddenly trying to observe what they're doing, describe
Mm-hmm.
it, and control it on an executive level that they never would do in the real world
Yep.
and that they wouldn't do in performance, right? No one wants to watch someone give themselves a voice lesson on stage, not
Yep.
only because it's not artistically fulfilling, but because you're actually going to get in the way of your best singing when you
Yep.
do it. Now, that being said, you try something, it works. Then if you want to have a discussion, why did that work? Well,
Yep.
here's some of the background of why that worked, but I promise you, thinking about that while you do it isn't going to be what's going to make this work. It's going to be getting it into your body so that it is your habituated behavior. It's
Yeah.
the thing your body does first when you ask it to complete the task.
For what it's worth, I could not agree more. I think there's a great skill set as a teacher to be able to intellectually understand why things work, an even sort of greater skill set to be able to synthesize it in a way that is translatable to a student, so that you don't need to understand everything I understand to be able to make this exercise work for you. But I think as a performer, sometimes it is a gift to not have that curse of all the knowledge. I go, it's great to be able to synthesize it for you, but I'm like, this is sometimes a little more of a curse than a blessing in terms of knowing every single reason why this could be offered, this could be wrong, or all this.
Totally. It's so funny to say that, when my students take their courses in vocal pedagogy, that's often the most challenging semester we work together
Yeah.
because they're constantly asking me why, or,
Yeah.
oh, Hood asked me to do this. He must mean I should also do this. And you're doing 5 steps that I didn't ask
Yeah.
for and you're getting in your own way.
Yeah.
The thing a student needs to know, in my personal opinion, is they have to have a model. They have to know what success feels and or sounds like.
Mm-hmm.
And they have to be able to distinguish what they're
Mm-hmm.
doing from that model. Am I completing the task as asked? And if not, they have to be able to simplify that task until they experience success again.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's memorizing the sound and sensation of success that's going to make that habit.
Yep.
So that they never have to think about it while they're actually performing.
Beautifully said. All right, my last question on the vocal ped nerdery. I just love to hear, you mentioned healthy. We haven't really talked about vocal health, but I'd love to kind of hear about when you're listening to a voice, whether it's specifically a vocal health issue that you're hearing or just actually a technique issue where you go, you mentioned someone who doesn't have any training. Oh, I can hear that raw potential. But maybe you're hearing somebody who has training that you go, I think this is actually unhelpful training. I might have to unwork before we rework or undo before we relearn some things. What are some of those red flags that may be kind of troublesome for you to hear as you're hearing a voice? Are there things that if you go, oof, if I hear this, it's really going to make me a little scared away from this student for 4 years, or just places where you go, this is something that you should start unlearning as soon as you can unlearn it?
Yeah, that's another great question. I think that's something that's important to distinguish, to delineate between is our job as singing voice teachers is habilitation, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's taking what our singers do as their baseline performance and improving it.
Mm-hmm.
And we never want to accidentally venture into rehabilitation, which
Mm-hmm.
is trying to bring a student back up to baseline because of some kind of functional issue or pathological issue with their voice. That's not our lane. And I think
Mm-hmm.
knowing to stay in our lane is hugely important. At NYU, we're lucky enough to have the Langone Voice Center, one of the top voice centers in the country. And so if we hear something that we fear might be some kind of need to
Mm-hmm.
have assistance to return to a baseline vocal function, we have tons of resources to direct our students to them.
Yep.
So that's thing number one. It's just making sure we're never trying to rehabilitate a voice where there might be something functional or physiological going on.
Yep.
But that being said, technically, what I think some of the things that I tend to encounter most as a singing teacher with a student who walks in my door for the first time is they have worked with a voice teacher for whom the answer for most vocal suboptimal singing is you're not supporting enough.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have this idea that pumping as much air through the
Mm-hmm.
instrument as possible all the time is the solution. And that usually creates, some kind of hyperfunction or
Mm-hmm.
some compensatory behavior that's just not helpful or efficient,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so looking out for that to make sure that airflow is our goal, like easy flow phonation in a way that isn't hyperfunctional.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's also um, another thing that I think I encounter most is when the instrument isn't functioning as optimally as it could, which is just about every singer.
Mm-hmm.
What muscles are engaging to try to do the work of something else, right?
Uh-huh.
Is the root of my tongue helping to keep my larynx stable because I have not learned to release it, right?
Uh-huh.
Is my jaw pronating because it gets this in a shape that gets the sound I want, but it's engaging muscles that I don't really necessary to get
Uh-huh.
that sound, right? So I'm looking out for one, am I pushing too much air through the instrument, or not enough? Because maybe they're coming predominantly from a choral background and they've internalized the idea of blending with the ensemble
Mm-hmm.
as not utilizing the full capacity of their airflow. And then also being on the lookout for tongue, jaw, extrinsic laryngeal muscles. What muscles are activating that are trying to do the work that should be done by some other part of the system?
And how often would that be in a live audition that you would give that as an adjustment of going, hey, I want to see what happens if we, whether it's there's too much air going to it, or there is a lot of tongue tension that you think you're hearing, you see a jaw doing. Are you going to give that as a singing adjustment to see what happens in the audition, or is that stuff that you're going to go, I'll evaluate and I can deal with that later on?
Usually and this is one of the great things about, we're lucky enough to get to evaluate these auditions with a panel of voice
Mm-hmm.
teachers with a range of skills and expertise. Some of us are much more comfortable with Western classical technique. Some of us are
Mm-hmm.
much more comfortable with contemporary technique. And what we can do as a group is look at that and say, that's a technical problem that can be very effectively addressed over the course of 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
Or that's a technical issue that might be pretty difficult to overcome over the
Uh-huh.
course of 4 years, right?
Uh-huh.
There might be times where we're curious, I wonder what's causing that sound. We
Uh-huh.
might play a little in the audition, hey, try it this way, or sing
Uh-huh.
it as if it's this, and let's see what that does. And they're like, oh, that unlocked something. That's something we can definitely work with, right?
Yep.
So that's in the audition. That is just it's more of the exception than the rule, but it's certainly something we're open to doing.
Yep.
More often, it's we collaborate and discuss what do we think is the viability of um, optimizing that singing over the course of 4 years with an expert teacher.
I love it. All right. Well, we'll wrap my very last question of all, just to speak to the parents in this process. I don't know how much interaction you get to have with those wonderful parents, but of course, we have a lot of parent listeners. What advice would you have to a parent of a young 17, 18-year-old who's looking at this process? Maybe if they're looking at schools at the very beginning, or if they're, about to, first a senior now, about to begin their senior year and about to do their whole audition tour. Sort of, how do you find parents can best support their children through this process?
Well, first of all, it is an incredibly time consuming and expensive process, right? And so accepting that as the reality, I think is first and foremost, because this industry, whether you're in classical, contemporary, or musical theater, this industry is front loaded with cost and work,
Mm-hmm.
right? Long before if you're going to have any measure of like professional performance success.
Mm-hmm.
So just understanding that that's part of the field that we're choosing. That's thing one. And I think thing two is not basing our top choices of school on quote unquote prestige,
Mm-hmm.
right? Oh, NYU is a prestigious school, so it should be near the top of my list. What I tell every student who's looking for advice on this, whether or not it points them to NYU or not, is write down a list of everything that could possibly be important to you about your college experience.
Mm-hmm.
Don't try to filter it. Don't try to organize it. Brainstorm it. Do I want to be within 1 day's drive of my parents? Or, oh my God, please, I want to be more than 1 day's drive with my parents.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a faith community of which I'm a part that I want to make sure is present wherever I go to school? Obviously, I think the voice teacher that you have, the performance opportunities you have, what your college experience outside of your major is going to be like, all those things. And then go through and thoughtfully decide, is this one of my highest priorities? Is this would be really great, but not completely essential? And is this bonus?
Mm-hmm.
And once you have that list of what are my highest priorities, what are the things that are important but not deal breakers, and what are the things that are just kind of bonus, that's going to help you narrow down your school way more than looking at a list of top 25 schools in this field. You and I were talking about a very specific school in the Midwest in our the pre-show, and I decided not to apply to that school.
We can out them. We may not be able to out your panel stuff, but this is Indiana we're talking about. This is
Sure,
my school.
sure.
Yeah.
And so, for me, it was like, is that a place where I'm going to get the things that I know I want? With such a large class size, with no guarantee of performance opportunities, with so many graduate students around, with the likelihood that I would be taught by graduate students rather than the faculty. Is Bloomington, Indiana, where I wanted to live for 4 years? All those things, regardless of what an incredible school it is and how many absurdly talented and wildly successful graduates they have, is that the best place for me personally? And it wasn't, right? And so I ended up going to a different school, both for undergrad and graduate school, even though it's acknowledged as one of the top schools in the world and should be.
Yep.
So that list, I think, is a way more, that personal list that you make, and then the effort of going through to decide what's most important to you from that list, is a way better guide than anything you're going to find online.
It's great, and I think very generous advice. I mean, it is certainly something we'll tell our students, but it's much easier hearing it from somebody who is at one of those prestigious schools that is in a lot of those lists to hear it's not all about that. I mean, it's a tricky balance because it's like, it's not nothing. That's not completely unimportant either.
Right.
That the school has a name, and those, it's like something that I feel like students feel gaslit when they're like, I know, but doesn't it matter a little? I mean, of course, it factors in like so many other things. It's a factor, but it shouldn't be the predominant factor.
Well, that should probably be on your list, right? What's the networking I'm going to do? What are those words on my resume going to do for me when I graduate? That should be something that you're considering for sure, right? But it should be one of the considerations, not the only one.
I love it. Errik, this has been so fun. If people want to get more information, of course, you mentioned that FAQs page. This could be really helpful to them. Do you like sending them to the website? Do we like social media? If people want to hear more after hearing an hour of us chat about NYU Steinhardt, what's the best way for them to get more information?
I point them directly to the NYU Vocal Performance website, because there are going to be links to performance videos, links to faculty bios. You're going to find and links to our social media. You're going to have a one-stop shop there. And then there's also an email alias they can reach through that website that goes to a number of us who could address questions or point folks in the direction of someone who can effectively answer those questions. So I know check out the website sounds like kind of a cop-out answer, but
no, it's good
that really works. And people can also look up if you just look up Errik Hood, NYU.
Yep. Good luck spelling it. We won't spell it for you. No, it's fine. They'll have to guess. If it's meant to be, they'll guess. No,
it's Errik. It's an oddly spelled name. I'm the only Errik Hood, I think, on earth with that spelling. So if you Google me and you Google NYU, you're going to get taken to my faculty site. Email me directly, and if I can't answer your question, I'll pass you along to someone who has the expertise to do so.
I love it. Errik, thanks for the time today. This was so fun.
I'm so grateful for the invitation. It's been so lovely to speak with you, and good luck, and bless all of you who are going through this process. I know it's hard, and remember that, if you don't mind, just one parting advice. Remember that when you visit these schools, you are looking for the best fit for you. Right? Where are you going to get the experience you need? It's not just they're auditioning you. You are auditioning them too. Find a place where you feel at home.
The sandwich is breaded and with a cherry on top. It worked out great.
That's how I like my sandwiches.